What does a cloud wear under its raincoat? Thunderwear.
It's funny you talk about underwear. Why is it that all of the ads you get during Father's Day are for underwear?
Really? Socks and underwear? I didn't get any of that stuff. I don't
That's
know
all
how.
I got.
I tried to stay off of social media the last few weeks. Like I go on, I make our posts, I engage with our community, and I do some of those things. But yeah, like I catch myself scrolling a little bit, and I just see, and I just get off. So like my presence online has been
Well,
minimized recently.
what's crazy is I don't do any of that, and yet I still have like my inbox full of like I bought underwear once. So our buddy at Armadillo Concealment, right,
Booth.
was telling us a story at SHOT Show one year after he got a vasectomy, and he was like, "You got to get this underwear because it just keeps everything nice and snug, which you want when you after you've had that procedure." Which I'll take your word for it right now. And so I was like, he's like, "You got to get a pair. They're like angel's hands just cupping." And I was like, "Okay." If you like, I mean, he talked about this for like a half hour.
Booth went on.
Like, I was like, "Wow, this must be the most magical pair of underwear ever." I'll buy a pair, and I bought one pair, and they work fine. And now, like, literally every time I go on the internet or an email, it's like, "Check out our new underwear." I'm like, "All right, unsubscribe." It still comes in. I'm like,
my God.
"All right."
I'm sick.
They're like, "Guess what? Father's Day. You know what you need? Underwear." I'm like, "No, I need a break.
How about a nap?
I
Maybe a
need
vacation?
Maybe nap time. Daddy needs nap time."
Yeah.
Anyways.
So what's today? Today's the 22nd of June. Yesterday was Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. Late in
Yes.
person,
In
finally.
person, yes. Happy
Alex
Father's
is
Day.
back in the office for the second time in about a week and a half.
I'll be here for more than 5 minutes this time.
Yeah, maybe an hour and a half this time.
We'll see.
But just had baby number 4.
Baby number 4.
We'll talk more about that in a few minutes, and we'll talk about if it was a boy or a girl or any of that kind of stuff. But did you have a good Father's Day?
Yes, yeah. Overall, yes. It's we're 1 week in with a newborn, with a 2-year-old and twin boys that are 4. So a lot going on in my house. So a Father's Day was, it's just like organized chaos.
Yeah.
So I took my kids on a hike. There's a forest preserve. Is it wildlife refuge? They call
I
it?
don't know.
Anyways, I took a hike with my brother and his 2 kids. So it was good to kind of be with him. We haven't seen much of them since COVID. You just they're trying to homeschool and with everything going on. And so it was good because I'm having to take I spent a lot of time with my kids through this pregnancy for leading up, and then just in general, like our work allows us a lot of flexibility. But it's never been just solely like, all right, you take these 3 kids under 4 practically, and good luck. Like I've always had that kind of like backstop of like look to the wife and be like, all right, I know you told me this once, but what's our plan on how we, discipline, or like what can they do or not do that seems to be like, let's push the boundaries so they can learn, mixed with they're going to get hurt, just trying to navigate those things, completely on my own. But so we're doing the hike, but picked the wrong day to go hiking, man. We got out there at 10:30. It was like
yesterday.
It was about 150 degrees with no breeze.
Uh-huh.
It was so hot.
It was hot yesterday.
And there's nothing that tries your patience more than like being hot with little kids and being hot.
Yeah.
And then they get hot. And then everyone's hot. And
You're like, we should have just gone to the pool.
What was I thinking?
I experienced
but it was
yesterday's heat
good.
as well.
But
We
it
were
was
out on
good.
the boat. I took my parents out. My dad, with all his long list of health issues, was finally like feeling decent, and
I'm
so
glad
we
to
took
hear
advantage of that.
Good.
And
At least
got
today was
him
a good
out on
day
the
for
boat
him.
for a little while.
Okay.
Yeah. So then he can only go probably an hour and a half or so before it's like, all right, we need to get him back
Just
on land.
Kind of
and-
the bumping of the water and just everything else.
So we get him back, and we're like, yeah, let's run to the house. Let's let the dog out, and we'll jump back out on the boat, and we'll go down to the sandbar or something. Low tides in like an hour, so that way the kids can get off the boat a little more and like play in the water and that kind of stuff. So we get to the sandbar, and I start seeing this cloud overhead. I'm like, oh, it's probably gonna rain for a few minutes, little summer shower, you know. It goes from that to like full on hurricane in like 4 seconds. It was absolutely did it storm that bad here? Like,
I was at my in-laws on the water there, and it it rained, but it
it
was and there's thunders in the distance, but
yeah, dude,
it wasn't like
it
a
was
hurricane.
gnarly. Like the kids were full on panic, you know, and I'm like, hey, listen, you're safe. Like this is like playing in the sprinklers right now. I mean, it was crazy though. Like
You're
I'm
you're
downplaying it like,
downplaying
oh, you guys, it's like being in the sprinklers, you know, but then like the wind just started kicking up and like the water
Gilligan's
turns
Island. Next
full
thing you know,
blown white
oh,
and like the rain is coming at like 90 degrees, just like stinging the back of your ears. You're trying to like turn your back to it. And I'm like holding over my ears. I got towels wrapped around the kids, and it's just coming in from every direction.
now were you still anchored?
We were anchored up
Yeah.
on the sandbar, but like smaller boats that like had smaller anchors and stuff, they're ripping anchors out of the sandbar. They're floating off. Some boats are like half sunk underwater because it's just taking on water from everywhere. I mean, it was wild.
Oh.
It was insane. People are just jumping on their boats and trying to go. I was like, I'm on land right now. Like, I'm not going out into that. Are you
Yeah.
crazy? Like, thankfully on a pontoon boat, like it's not gonna sink. All these other boats, you know, some of these small crafts, like they don't really have bilge pumps pumping water out and stuff. Like
Yeah.
they're just taking on water. So at least I have like safe in that regard. And I
Yeah.
kept telling the girls, like, listen, you guys are safe. Like we're gonna be fine. It's just seems a little scary right now. It's
Yeah.
gonna be the coolest thing you ever did next week,
Yeah.
promise. You know, of course, Kendall's like terrified of the boat. Like she'll be like, "Yeah, let's go on the boat," and we get on the boat, or she'll just put up a fight the whole time. Say she's so scared of the boat and so scared. I'm like, "Why are you so scared of the boat?" And then right before that happened, she was talking about how she wanted to live on the boat, and then the storm comes rolling. I'm like, "God, she's
I don't know.
never going on the boat ever again after
Next week
this."
you'll be like, let's go on the boat. She's nah, I'm
Oh
good.
man, yeah. And they were like, I want a big boat with windows." I was like, "So do I."
I want my yacht, Dad.
Yeah.
Like, all right,
Yeah.
calm down. I'm
Oh,
gonna
it
get you a
was-
canoe
It
next time.
was crazy, man. It was pretty wild, but Brandy and I were loving it. We were like, "This is awesome." But yeah, quite the adventure for Father's Day for us, and we won't forget that one. But it was a long, exhausting day. It's funny because the difference between like Mother's Day and Father's Day, I feel like is so different. You know, in terms of like, in my mind, it's like, oh, Mother's Day, like we're gonna let mom do what she wants, and it's gonna be like, let's make it a nice, calm, peaceful day for her or whatever. Whether, you know, she could go to the spa if she wants to, or she could just, you know, we could all do something together, whatever. But like, I feel like on Father's Day, you're just doing whatever they tell you to do, anyways. And it's like exhausting. It's like the day you just want to like have to yourself or go shooting with your buddies and take a nap and be lazy and sit in bed and drink coffee all morning or something. It's like the most exhausting days ever.
Yeah. Well, it's
I'm grateful for them.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
Like
I
I don't
was-
want to downplay that because I know there's a lot of parents that maybe can't even be with their kids or deployed or work, you know, as first responders, and they can't be, and they'd much rather be with their kids. So I'm not downplaying that, but like in my mind, it's just like, oh, it's gonna be like this nice, calm, relaxing.
Well, there's such like
lazy
the
day.
stereotypes, right? Of you know, Mother's Day, like, oh, we're gonna do brunch and everything else, and like I've had the conversations with the wife where I'm like, it's Mother's Day. She's like, yeah. I'm like, so you just want me to take the kids so you can have all the time by yourself? Like, yes. I was like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like,
Yeah.
you're with them all the time. Like,
Right.
you deserve a day where just think about you for about 10 seconds. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
same
Yeah,
thing.
Brandy's there now. Where gymnastics
There's nothing wrong
schedules
with
keep
it.
changing, and Kendall's not doing anything. Brandy and I don't. We haven't. We just don't get a break from anything ever. Like since this whole COVID thing started, like we don't really have anybody that can watch the kids for us, you know. And like we went out once. We've been out to dinner twice now since things that kind of let up.
Well,
little
what's
bit. We
gonna
got
be
a new
interesting is,
babysitter
like,
recently.
is going to be like school like that. It seems like a lot of the daycare places are setting some interesting precedents. I go into the politics of it, but just I know one place that like a teacher tested, or you know, a teacher tested positive and a kid tested positive, so they shut the school down for 2 weeks. I think they're in week 2 now, and it's kind of like, well, during those 2 weeks, is someone else going to get it, and then they come back to school and then they shut it. So like, if they just constantly just keep shutting things down as opposed to figuring out a way to minimize it and live with the new norm, what's going to happen for all these people that don't have as much
Well,
flexibility going
exactly. There's
into public schools and everything else. If they keep shutting down public schools, for example, every other week, what are you supposed to do with your kids?
yeah, there's
Well,
parents that can't
I
do
mean,
that.
from a just like balancing, obviously keeping them safe, Wicks with, like, okay, so you work every other week, then how are you supposed to provide
Yeah, maintain an
and
income and
maintain some consistency on like an education standpoint? Like
yeah,
kids
Brandy
need
just had to
it.
take a survey for the school.
So
She said it was like split 50-50 on parents that like wanted and or needed for school to start back in August because they haven't been working or whatever.
yeah,
Uh, and then parents that didn't want their kids to go back to school. It was like 50-50. Like, what are they going to do? Just like not open the school and try to continue online learning only? Like, if you don't want your kid to go to school, then just don't take them to school and,
homeschool.
homeschool them or figure it out yourself. But like, there's kids that need to go to a public school. I mean,
It's a
like,
safer environment. They
there's
can get food. I
they can
mean,
get
there's a lot
food
of
for some
kids like
kids. There's parents that need to work. There's like parents can't just be like, oh, well, I'm just not going to work for the next 3 months
or
or
in this
6
case,
months
like
or
yeah, in the next like year.
year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it just, I don't have the answer to the solutions and I'm not pretending to, but it just blows my mind.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna have to navigate a new navigate a new norm, and yeah, or else we're just gonna be completely crippled by it. And then my concern is like, what are we doing to the kids? Like,
I don't think we're doing them any favors. That's
well,
for
because now
sure.
I mean, you think about it. Like, I mean, my kids are thankfully young enough to where like we're not we like next year would be kindergarten, if I'm not mistaken, for them. So, like, I've got another year to kind of like let the world figure it out.
Yeah.
Thankfully for me, but it's like we need to teach good hand. Like all of a sudden, I was talking to someone just this morning who they were like in their office. They were like, yeah, like we were like half as many people here, but we're going through 3 times as much soap. You're like, oh,
Oh,
so
people are
wait,
actually
people are
washing their,
actually washing their hands. It's kind of like I'm glad to see that trend, but you're going, what the hell did everyone do like before pandemic? Like
yeah,
you just sneeze and then didn't wash your hands.
right. That and people
But
are washing their hands like way more often. There's a lot of times I just walk past the sink and I'm like, oh, I'll
yeah,
just stop and
why
wash my
not?
hands.
Yeah, but during flu and cold season, anyways, it's kind of like that's not bad practice, right?
Right.
But then for like the kid, it's like, but if you start making them almost like they're gonna become like complete germaphobes, it's like, how do you build up your immunity? Like go dig in the dirt and you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, we need to wash our hands and do certain things, but we're gonna like scar our kids to where like they don't want to go
I
out in public because they're
Yeah,
like, oh, the virus is there. Because I mean, how do I explain to my kids? I'm like, they're like, why haven't we been in school? I'm like, well, we've already had 12 weeks of summer, and Daddy needs you to go to school. But it's like, well, how do I? Oh, I'm like, well, and I'm trying to be somewhat like I don't want to just I want to talk to them like they're not like they're kids, not like they're adults, and try to like bridge the gap, So it's like, well, there's a virus going around that are do get people sick, so that's why right now we just need to wash our hands. And so then they're like, oh, we can't do this because of the virus. Oh, we can't do this. So it's like, all right, now I'm like,
yeah.
how do I like? I
My
don't want it to
kids,
be like every time we do something, it's oh they must have the virus. It's like
yeah,
it's a weird
it's
balance.
tough, and they're super young. It's hard for them to
Yeah,
connect those dots. And
my
my kids
kids.
were kind of the same way in the beginning because everybody, I mean, the whole world was kind of like that in the beginning, um, but I know what you mean. We're trying to like articulate that message to them.
It's like every time you go to the bathroom, wash your hands, but not just like be so like every 4 seconds doing the hand sanitizer, like
Right.
almost like to the crippled by it.
Yeah. A lot of the world is crippled by it. I was listening to Joe Rogan. I don't remember who he was talking to in this particular podcast, but he was talking about the virus and all this stuff. And he's like, people, it's almost getting worse because people haven't, their immune systems are worse now than they were before. You know what I mean? Like they're staying inside, they're not getting vitamin D, they're like all these different things. He's like, it's no different from working out, right? Like you work out, you're breaking down your muscle, and then as it builds back up, your muscle grows and all stuff. It's no different from that, where it's like you kind of you need to get sick, you need to break your body down for it to get stronger. Otherwise you end up with just no muscle or a weak immune system. It's like people need to be getting sick and need to be doing those things and breaking it down because
Almost
that's how
like
your
passing
body
along
gets
some of like
stronger.
the common stuff,
Common
right? Yeah.
cold stuff, like and just
Yeah.
random germs or whatever,
Yeah.
but people aren't even getting that now, and their immune systems are getting weaker because they're not being tested, they're not being pushed.
Mhm.
And it was really interesting to kind of
Yeah.
hear it in that put that way. It was like, dang.
Yeah.
That's why I think that's
It's
why
gonna
I
be
never get sick because like I'm just sorry, Travis just told me to put the mic closer to me. I'm just like always out, always talking with people, doing things like I don't remember the last time I was sick. Do you remember I haven't been sick in years, probably. Maybe a random like 24-hour cold or something like that.
Yeah, I
But
can't.
otherwise, I'm like never sick. But
Yeah, no, it's certainly an interesting balance between, not trying to, get the older population in particular who
mhm,
are in nursing homes and everything else. I guess, try to keep the elderly, and that's, people that are compromised, not just inundate them, and then but the other side of it is, do we have a society and a world to open our doors to?
yeah,
We're not an agricultural culture anymore where we're like everyone's in their backyard, raising their own, cows and chickens and grain. We kind of we're all dependent upon each other to keep this thing
it's
going. So
interesting. Yeah, I was just having this conversation. It's like how vulnerable our country is in so many ways.
I think the
Um,
world, in some respects.
yeah. Anyways, I didn't want to make it a whole episode about the coronavirus. But speaking of the coronavirus, I have so many questions for you. So Alex just had his fourth
Yeah.
child. So I want to know what it was like having a child during the time of COVID and what sort of protocols and all that kind of stuff. But more importantly, was it a boy or was it a girl, Alex?
We welcomed our fourth boy to the world this past Sunday. We kept it a complete surprise.
Yeah.
So we were going to keep the first pregnancy a surprise. Found out we were having twins. It was like, gotta know.
Yeah.
Then we had a surprise enough child with number three, second pregnancy, where I was like, all right, let's just find out. And then this one was like overcoming some medical odds here.
Well, yeah. So like backing up, like this child was not supposed to be born.
Mm.
Period. Like Emily had an IUD, like all the birth control going on, everything, and then it's like, oh, I'm pregnant. It's like,
Well,
what?
and at that we were the doctors were very concerned in the beginning that it was going to be a non-viable pregnancy too.
Right. I mean,
So
it was all kinds of things going on, but
mixed
thankfully,
bag of emotions, but so
and
baby, everyone's
healthy and
doing well. He came into the world, peed all over the doctors.
nice.
We had a scheduled C-section, so yeah, it was kind of it's never gets old, if you would, watching the child just come out.
I can't
I mean,
imagine.
it's a
I don't.
rather unique experience. In
Yeah,
that
I haven't
regards.
experienced a C-section, so I
But
can't like relate on that exact
I mean, same thing. I
experience.
mean,
Yeah.
whichever direction the baby's coming from, it's still kind of like, oh, all of a sudden that is a human. But yeah, just kind of hosed everyone down. I was like, it's a boy, and but yeah, healthy. He's doing well. The mom's doing well. We're 1 week in now, trying to navigate, sleep at night and those types of things. But
How
yeah,
was
so
the
baby boy and
hospital
everyone's
experience?
good.
Yeah.
So obviously we're in Bluffton, South Carolina. We're not in a big New York City. The ward or I guess the maternity side that we were on hadn't had a COVID patient yet from like a mom who was positive delivering.
We don't have a
But
huge number of positive people in our county, even.
yeah,
So we're really
in
thankful.
relative, thankfully. But so the new protocols that we had to deal with specifically going into the hospital was, they only let you go in through one entrance. They scan, your temperature for, before you can even be allowed in, which I don't think does much anymore. But anyways,
It makes everyone feel better, right?
makes everyone feel better. So they take your temperature, we go back, and then it was, inside the hospital in the hallways, you always had to wear a mask. The only time you didn't wear a mask was like inside the room. All the nurses and doctors always wore a mask. But other than that, for our situation,
Pretty
there
normal.
wasn't anything too crazy, put upon, burdened upon us. Now, a lot of different things was we couldn't have any visitors.
Hmm.
So a lot of times, we're fortunate to have a lot of family locally. So, I mean, whenever we've had a kid, it's always been like, there's party going on in the room. And so that was different because, like you want grandma and grandpa to see them. You want for me, my brothers and my sisters and you know, in-laws,
Me, I couldn't come.
Beav was there last time with taking
Anders,
some
yeah.
photos and everything else. So it was fun to have that experience with people. And so for anyone who's is gonna have a baby soon, especially if it's your first, you that might be a disappointing aspect of it. I could see where it'd be very disappointing
Yeah,
because
but there's a lot less crap to take home with you
well,
too.
I was gonna get to 2 points. So, from the one side, I've been very fortunate to be able to have the experience where I've had everyone in there and be able to share in the joys of, bringing, a new life to this world and, like, be able to see my mom, just those
Yeah, those
experiences,
moments.
which again, so anyone who's gonna have a baby soon is likely not gonna have those memories. But what I can tell you, especially knowing that I had 3 kids at home, I really appreciated in hindsight now that I was able to it was the wife and I and new baby. We actually only stayed in the hospital for 24 hours,
Which is
which is crazy
crazy.
with a C-section, but um it was one of those moments though. It's like I actually got to just kind of enjoy the moment as opposed to,
Some visitor stopping
yeah,
in and
like
da, da, da.
every hour there was a new, like, oh, my brother's here now. Oh, my sister, yeah, here now. Oh, your parents. Oh, my parents. Oh, doctor. Oh,
Yeah.
and then bringing even like my kids in. Then it's like, okay, like, all right, don't touch this. Be careful on that. Don't,
They let the kids come in?
no, they don't. That's
Oh,
what I'm
okay.
saying. Like before, they
Oh,
would
yeah,
let the
yeah, yeah,
kids
yeah.
come in. So, there's all those kind of juggling acts where I was like, I actually just got to like sit and enjoy the quiet,
Yeah,
which
well,
never
because the
happens,
baby sleeps a lot at that time.
and and just kind of focus my attention on him and her, and so be, again, easy to say when I've had both experiences. I was able to experience with a whole bunch of family and then experience with just the nucleus of the family. And I took it away as a great positive, like, because it can be overwhelming. You're like, she just had her major surgery.
Mhm.
She's trying to, she nurses, so it's like, all right, we're trying to get the baby to make sure it's feeding well, coming down off of all the hormones, rightfully so. That starts to trickle and mixed with, one night with no sleep. So like, there's just, and I mean, hospital beds are uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that
They
stupid
come in,
chair
yeah. Like
that you
the
have to.
new chair like they had actually goes like completely flat.
Which
Like,
chair did you get? Like a blue, was it blue and wood?
yeah, yeah, it was that stick. It was the
Like
one
that.
that, like, if you don't have a sheet and your skin touches it, you're like peeling it off at night. You're like, man, I didn't know I was like duct taped to the chairs. So
Right.
miserable. Anyways, if you're packing a hospital bag, you might want to add an extra, like, just pack your own little like
Like a
sheet
sheet.
and make sure you bring your own pillow from home. It makes a world of
Yeah,
difference. But
that's a good one. I didn't really think about a sheet. I'm gonna have to add that to our
well, thankfully,
hospital bag packing list.
I mean, she was just hot, like coming off all the drugs from, the anesthesia, the epidural, all the stuff. So she didn't want all her blankets, so I like kind of was able
I'll
to
take
like
that
take
one.
them. But I mean, it's cold in hospital rooms, so
Yeah.
but anyway, so that was a big difference as it relates to kind of the COVID experience.
And we know how social you are, so
But again, you can either choose to be kind of just disappointed and upset by it, or you can look at the positive angle of it. And for me, I really want, it's just surprising, I know, coming from me, but looked at the positive. It's like I got to have the only quiet time I'm probably gonna ever have with this child before I brought it home to the other kids.
right.
And for me, it was kind of nice that I didn't have to divert attention with in-laws and everyone else. It was just
Yeah.
focused. So that was something that was a little bit different. And then from the pediatrician's standpoint, we've had our checkups, and thankfully he's gaining his weight back, and everything has been good. But it was interesting. It was like, I was like, well, so what do we do? Do we, do the grandparents hold the kid, and then do we not? Like, what's kind of from your world? What's your protocol? And I've had two different opinions. We've had one that was like, hey, I would just say like, just kind of keep everyone at 6 feet away, and unless you have to have someone else hold them, like don't. That's what I typically recommend with flu season, anyways. And then our doctor is kind of like, to be honest, I'm not. It's so rare that an infant, from what we found, is gonna have, unless there's an underlying issue, anyways. Like
Some
it's
symptoms and
it's more it's more likely that if the baby has COVID, in this case, we'll pass it to like the grandparent, who's might typically be over 65, and they have more issues. So it's more like it was in my mind it was very much, grandparent to baby, and in his mind he's like,
more
I'd be
worried about
concerned about
grandparent.
the grandparent than, because he was saying, he's got people that are like, hey, like, well, my parents want to fly down. They live in Pennsylvania, but they're not gonna be around the baby. And he's like, well, how old are your parents? They're like, oh, like he's like 70, and well, and he's actually had like surgery, so he's on some like pills, but he's gonna stay away from the baby. He's like, so he's gonna get COVID on the plane ride down.
Yeah.
Like what? Like if you want him to be there, then and that's a risk you want to take, that's fine. Like I'm not gonna tell you no, but I'm like, you're taking more risk coming down here than you are like holding the child. And
Yeah.
so I thought that was, and he tends to be a little bit more, this doctor, which I appreciate. Not as much of a super conservative and super alarmist. It's kind of like this, like, here's the real world, and we just have to
Right.
navigate through it. But as far as it relates to the kids, he's like, well, don't have the kids kiss on the baby, like, hey, kiss your brother's feet, and do those sorts of things, like, just like, let's give it a little bit more time before we subject this newborn to the common stuff
All
that
the
all of us
things.
get.
Yeah.
So he's like, anyone that holds the kid, make sure like they really wash their hands. If they're gonna cough, like, make sure you turn away, and you maybe don't let them hold them for hours at an, and like
Speak.
hold them for like a few minutes, and then we'll take them back, but not try to just completely live in a bubble in that respects. But and then just have the honest conversations with people, like if you're feeling any sort of symptoms, like
Don't
d-
bring your
don't
ass
come
over here.
around. So it's kind of just asking people to be very respectful and aware of
Yeah,
them,
which is why,
which
like, and I told you, like, I wanted to give you guys space on that too. Like, I wanted to come see the baby so bad, but like, I'm out and about, I'm around, I'm doing things. Like, I'm not trying to bring something over there as much as
we
I want to come see
appreciate,
the baby.
so like my brother, you know because we went hiking together, he came by, and he saw the baby for the first time, but it was, like, Emily was holding him, and he kind of looked at him and was like, I'll hold him in a little bit. Like, let's just kind of get through these first times. So at least, the people that I'm around hasn't been, very understanding. I know some probably family dynamics are a little more, could be hostile, and
Right.
but everyone,
Hostile, hostage situation with the baby. With the
yeah.
baby down.
Um, well, it's kind of like, it's like babies and weddings kind of bring out some weird dynamics with people that you would have like never, like, why are you
Imagined.
getting so hot and bothered? Well, you didn't invite this person's second brother's cousin to it. It's like, I got a budget, bitch. Like, that's why, like, I got like, I don't know my third cousin, but my best friend from college, or even a buddy from college, like, I got more, like, I want him there. It's my wedding. He's coming. Sorry.
Deal with it.
So, like, again, like, it just brings out some of the best and some of the worst in
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
weddings and babies. But everyone's obviously been real respective uh,
Of
of
all
the
the things.
situation, and
Yeah.
just trying to be smart. And I think that's just been the biggest thing, is like, how do we, because I don't keep my kids in a bubble right now. Like, they're still having to go to someone's house just because I got to get them out. Like, that's the only time, like,
Well, you've
we
got
can
4
sleep
kids,
and everything
and
else.
you've got a newborn and a 2-year-old. Like, they're high maintenance. You got a lot going on there, and then you've got the twins who are 4.5, 4,
But
just
pretty
over
good.
4.
Just over 4.
Um, and they're a little more capable to go somewhere and be watched by somebody. And I know
You
this
got to
is
for sanity.
you well, yeah, and that's the thing. So this is what the point I wanted to get to, because you had mentioned this to me over the phone just kind of the day after having the baby, and you're like having those weird mixed bag of emotions of like trying to trying to split your attention between 4 kids and feeling somewhat guilty that the new baby doesn't get the same level of attention that the other ones did in the early days, because you're now, Emily's taking care of the baby. You're having 3 other boys you got to take care of and, get ready and bath times and all these different things. Meanwhile, you probably haven't, once since you've been home, haven't spent probably nearly as much time with the baby as you would have liked to, or that you
Mhm.
did with the other kids. So I'm sure that first night in the hospital was like, let me cherish this because I might not see this kid for like a week because it's going to be crazy when we get home. What I don't know. It was just kind of a fascinating thing that you had, and I hadn't. You
Yeah,
said, "Oh, you
I
can
was trying.
probably relate to this." I'm like, "Nah, not really." Like, I didn't like
Yeah,
because
well, I remember this even with the 2-year-old. It was like, I got. Yeah, actually, I had this with even the twins because it was like, there wasn't just one that you could devote all your attention to. So, like, right out the gate, I was like, I went from, a life of only really having to take care of myself to then instantly then divide it by two. So it was like, oh, if I held this baby, did I hold this one enough? Like those feelings are like, well, I don't know how to raise twins, let alone raise a kid, because
yeah,
this is my
because it's
first
first time.
kids.
Yeah,
But then secondly, it's like, and I know they're young, so they're not going to really remember this either. But then it was like, well, because there's twins, I was like hyper alert to like, I want to make sure that I don't appear that I'm favoring one or the other. Like I want to treat them, equally. So then when Anders was born, it was like, okay, all right, I'm already trying to make sure I'm splitting, and then I want to make sure he gets the attention, and especially now that he's two, it's like, how do I make sure he knows that I'm involved and around him? The kids can be a little bit older and play by themselves, but when they want my attention, I want to make sure they don't feel like I'm like not approachable either. So the emotions then with this one was very much kind of that same like feelings of just how do you try to balance. It's like I know the baby doesn't really just needs mom right now, but I'm feeling pulled because like it's almost like you like for me in particular, it's almost like you must feel your like soul kind of like split in a positive way, but like kind of like split where it's like I now have to make more room for someone else to give them the kind of the love and attention and affection that I want to give them. And
hmm
it's like you almost like you used kind of like you need to break your muscles down to rebuild them. It's almost like my muscles had to be broken down to be rebuilt to be a little bit stronger, to be able to like have the capacity, right,
right.
to
The
to
bandwidth,
to the bandwidth to deal with all of them. And I mean, I'm kind of like a self-proclaimed, control freak in a way.
100%. Not in a way you absolutely are,
So there's,
but I appreciate that.
for me too, it was like, all right, well, here's another situation I can't control. And so you gotta have time to just like break it down, to then be able to like, okay, like, and
Which I'm sure has created a lot of anxiety for you.
yeah,
You
and
know, be,
and you come off. It was interesting. So, the wife's cousin, husband, if everyone can follow that, it's not too
Dr.
difficult,
Bill.
is a pediatrician as well. And so, obviously, when I was in the hospital, I was texting him, and
I want to get him back on the podcast.
the first text he had to me was, how are you doing after all this work? And I was like, Emily did all the work. I didn't do anything. He's like, no, like, don't
Discount.
devalue and discount the kind of like mental work that you've had to put in as well. And then like it really kind of like sank in, especially being in the hospital where I didn't have to like worry about my other kids. It was like, you know what, like for the like the male who's like actively involved in the pregnancy and actively involved in parenting and everything else, there is emotion tied to it. We don't really, at least I don't know how to articulate it most of the time, nor would I just go up to my buddy and be like, hey, I've got feelings today. Like that's just not something we're going to talk about. But there isn't, like, if you want to try to be the best parent, father, you can. There's emotion involved. You're emotionally involved in that
hmm
process. So it really dawned on me. It's like, how are you? And it was like, you know what? Like I do have the feels because like leading up to it, you're like, okay, in this case, COVID, right? So like, what is that even going to look like in the hospital? And then secondly, it's like, well, then how are we going to treat that with the family members and who can come around. And then,
Just all the logistics around that
then like we've
particular
had
situation.
ultrasounds, right? And all the ultrasounds have come back where, they appears healthy, but he comes out the wound here. Maybe they can notice something. They put, a good, like, wow, sounds like something's wrong with his heart or his lungs. He's not breathing well. Like, did he do his first like poop? Like, are the bowels like working? Right? There's things like, did he swallow some of that on the way out, which would make it more jaundice, which create, there's all these kind of like emotions built up to then, and then obviously, I mean, it's a major surgery, so like, is she gonna hemorrhage? Is she, like there,
Yeah.
there's all this emotion
A
to then
lot of the
so
what
then you
ifs and
come
all that
so you
stuff.
come
Yeah.
out of it on the other side, right? And you're like, okay, you start checking off the list. In my case, we're very blessed, and I know how blessed we are because, I mean, we get the emails from customers that are just heartbreaking,
Mm,
or heartbreaking in the sense too of like they've come out on the other side of it, but those NICU days, those NICU weeks, those NICU months,
months.
you're just like, I mean, it just pulls at you. So I've got all those, emotions built up into it. So it's like we come out on the other side, right? And I start checking off the list. It's like, all right, we made it 24 hours. Like the risk of hemorrhaging for her is drastically reduced. Okay. 24 hours, like the baby was able to latch, like, because we would prefer not to formula feed
If you can help it.
if we can
Yeah.
help it. All right, he's actually kind of latching, like, think, okay, whew, like, our milk's not coming,
Did
but
you guys have
like,
a better experience with trying to breastfeed initially after being through it so many times? Like
I
the
think
first
for
time versus the fourth time?
yeah, well, I mean, there's two things on that one. She was nursing twins right out the gate, so no experience, and then two at a time.
Right.
So I've learned a lot more about nursing than I thought I would ever.
I know. But
So
it's interesting though, because there's like there's different techniques that you can
yeah,
try. There's different,
so
holding the baby this way versus that way, or that there's, like
yeah,
the
I
fourth
would
time around.
say for any male or female listening, like take advantage of the lactation consultants. And for the male too, like you gotta be in it and support it, or it's just gonna be such a burden on the female because it's not like Instagram posts. You see these women, they're
It's all
like,
rainbows and
it's like
unicorns.
it's like
No,
a
it
newborn
can
and they're
be
public and be like, hey, like look at me. It's like
it's not
it's
it can be a
not
very
it's yeah,
frustrating
because
experience
most of my
for
kids are
mom
tongue
and the
tied a
baby.
little bit, and so we finally we were gonna try to not cut his. He had a moderate one, but we ended up just being like,
Just doing it.
we're gonna get it, and sure enough, the latch is so much better. But yes, it's not just this magical. Oh, baby comes out, and this is how it works. Like you got to work at
Oh,
this between the baby's got to work, figure it out. The mom is, and when you start getting more of the anxiety too of like, well, it's not
stress and
working, and then
yeah.
everyone's stressed. The baby senses it, so I think that helps because it's baby four. Like she was able to nurse the twins for a year, nurse the other one for a year. Like
Did
so, I
Emily
think
come into that like
I
I
think
got this? Like we're
well, she's anxious.
right.
She was definitely anxious. She still is. But yet, like, I understand this doesn't feel right. But if it's your first time, you don't know what it feels like. If you think it's working, but like, no, like that baby's got to,
Really
like, it's
latch
got to
on.
get
Like
on,
they call it
like
latching
it
on.
ain't just the tip, So
You got to
you're
get a
welcome.
mouthful.
You really do to make
I
it
mean,
work.
that's the
I
way
mean,
it goes.
again, and
That
so
baby's got to get a mouthful.
thankfully, she was
Travis
very
is over here like, what the
yeah,
hell?
like
No kids. Uncle T Dog over here. He's like, oh,
Mm.
I feel so awkward right now.
But we thankfully the wife was very proactive too in seeking out help in the beginning, even though it seemed like things were working well. It was like, well, am I doing this right? And then you pick up on one tidbit, or they see the way that your baby is doing it, and then they help. I mean, if you get a good one. So even now she was talking about like, oh, like, because a lot of those classes are not happening right now due to COVID. She happened to build a good relationship with one that's on the island. So I think we'll be able to do some like one-on-ones. And I'm like, in my back of my mind, I was like, well, like you
Yeah.
got this. What are you?
Definitely know what
What
we're
are you
doing here.
what are
We're
you,
pro.
Mhm. But nevertheless, it's like, I mean, just because you know how to
You might learn
change a
one little
tire and do some oil changes doesn't mean the guy that's been doing it for 60 years can't give you this. Well, hey, on this car, here's a little tip for you. You know what I
Right.
mean? So seek it out if you're going to try to do it. But it's definitely not. It's definitely there's a lot of energy and effort that goes into it, and it's much more of a burden on her, obviously, at night. I mean, I can't.
Yeah, you
I
can't
mean, I
help
can I
feed the
could take the
baby at night.
baby and burp him and change a diaper, but
You can't sit there and feed it,
you know what it was at the what
breastfeed it.
movie was that? It's like, I got nipples. Can you milk me? Well, Meet the Fockers, right? You know, like you got the little cat, and
That's
because
so
I grew up
funny.
on the farm. But so, anyways, back to like just the emotional side of it coming out. You know, I started doing the check boxes, like, oh, thank he was able to latch. Whew, like that's a big
Yeah.
check off the list. His jaundice level was good. You know, so you know, he came out bigger than all my other kids, which
Oh yeah.
you know,
How much did you
he
weigh?
was 7 pounds. So
The
the
other, yeah.
twins were like 412 and 414, and then Anders was 6'3", which is crazy too. Is like I started looking at some photos and I was like, man, I didn't realize how old man Anders, you know, like skinny and lengthy, you know, and then he's actually, you know, got some like a little bit of meat on him, which is a more comforting feeling too. You
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
you
Fat
know,
babies are happy babies, man.
yeah, yeah.
For sure. My
So
kids were massive fatties. I mean, they were both Cameron was a little smaller. She was 8 pounds 10 ounces or something, or maybe a little closer to 9 pounds, and Kendall was like 9 pounds 2 ounces or something. And they're like, I mean, those are big kids, but they're like
yeah,
the skinniest, scrawniest little lean little girls now.
now, yeah.
But fat babies are happy babies for
Well,
sure.
they just got a little bit more to work with for sure.
Yeah.
But
And then you get to that point, they lose, a pound or something before you leave the hospital,
yeah,
which is like
I think it's usually about
crazy.
10% of the body weight is what they try to
Kind of
kind
keep
of
it.
would ideally like to see no more than, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but yeah, so but back to the emotion real quick. I'll wrap up
Yeah,
that
yeah.
thought. Was more like you check off all those lists, so it's almost like you come down off of that, like, okay, whew, and it's like once you have that like breather where you're like, okay, like everyone seems to be good. You know, things can still flare up right now, but every day you inch a little bit closer. You know what I
Well,
mean?
that
And so it's like
anxiety level
once
comes
you
down a little bit.
and I think
The
that's what the
adrenaline.
doctor, when he was texting me, was like, "How you doing?" It's like because he knows like the women like in day 3 have the biggest between babies born and day 3. It's like the biggest hormone drop out of like any species in the world of like a pendulum swing for them.
hmm
So any parent dad out there,
Well, it
be
was
prepared and be very supportive and look for day 3 because you're
emotional breakdown.
yes, and encourage it because that means she's normal,
Yeah.
and be supportive and just accept it
But
and just
it's
be
really
there.
interesting. I wouldn't have thought about that either. It was really cool for Dr. Bill to like reach out to you and make sure, because during that period of time, it really is all about mom. Everyone's more worried about mom, but very few people, even myself, I wouldn't even like, you don't even realize that you're such a part of it. And so emotionally and really physically involved in this whole situation, but no one's like, hey dad, are you okay? Are you good? Like,
Mhm. It
like
was
you've
more
been,
like, "Oh, is dad gonna faint?" You know, like,
yeah,
like those
those
kinds
kind of
of
funny moments
funny
where,
moments or jokes, you know, and it's like but yeah, like, I mean, I think that was it. It's like, I didn't realize I came down from such, like, you know, you're like I can only relate it, and I can't speak from personal experience, but you gotta imagine, like, people, you know, in on the front lines in the middle like, when you're on that hyper alert, and then you step out of it, I mean, it's gotta be a huge crash
oh
because,
yeah,
like, you know, like, every spider sense was working to keep you alive,
yeah.
and
And
you
I
come
work,
down
I
off it.
work, I work best in those types of pressures. Like I pride myself on staying super calm in very stressful situations. Even yesterday on the boat, with this crazy storm. And this is just fresh in my mind because it just happened yesterday. But like the kids are freaking out. Brandy was a little freaked out because it was wild, but I knew she's obsessed with storms and weather, and
Yeah,
she
yeah.
wants to be like a storm chaser. But she was still like, "Oh my god!" But I was like, "Hey, it's okay. Like." Think about what's going on right now. Like we're anchored, we're sitting on land, we're not out in 5, 6 foot, 8 foot seas being sloshed around. Like
Yeah.
we're in the best place we could be
Given the
currently.
situation.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know what I mean. Like the worst thing we have to experience right now is just heavy rain, and we have double bimini tops. Like yes, we're getting water sideways, but like we're good, we're
Yeah.
fine. Like that guy over there, not so much. And
Yeah.
I was very alert and aware of like everyone else's situation too. Like I was ready to kind of help someone out in need if I needed to, but my family was my time. I wasn't going to leave my family who
Yeah.
was like freaked out to go help someone else
Yeah.
um, immediately unless it got to a point. But
Yeah.
I was so calm. Like I stay so calm. I bet you my heart rate probably drops. Like I don't get all.
Yeah.
I just I can see everything going on around me. I
Mhm.
just stay super clear, and I think things like that, even in the hospital room giving birth with the kids, and the nurses like came up to me afterwards. They were like, "You were awesome," because everyone's like, they can see the contractions happening. So
Mhm.
you haven't experienced it that way. You guys do a C-section from 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 the first time, so
Yeah.
like you had to do that. So Brandy going natural birth there, it's like, okay, contractions, you got to push, you know what I mean? So everybody's like, all right, push, 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 and it's like this kind of like stressful thing. Meanwhile, I'm like calm. I'm holding Brandy's hand. I'm helping holding her leg, and it's like I'm counting to 10. Most every people that they want them to push for 10 seconds or whatever. So I'm just like 1, 2,
Count
3.
faster.
Yeah, and that's like 1, 2, 3, and they were like, "You were awesome." Like you just like calm and like, but like if you need someone to stay calm and
Yeah.
bring that level down, otherwise the anxiety levels just
Just
get
keeps
out of
going.
control, and then
Yeah.
it just
Well, and
makes it
that's
all more
and I
stressful.
think for me, I try to mask it.
Hmm.
So once things once I'm able to stop putting on the
The facade.
facade, and then all of a sudden it's like whoosh, and
Yeah.
then you're like, and then the reality sets in. I'm like, all right, how am I gonna feed these kids? Like my I like my
Yeah,
kids just
behind that facade
my
is
kids
the
are eating like full grown adult burritos and they're 4. I'm like, all right, so when they're 8, they're gonna have 2. And when they're 16, I'm gonna be in the poorhouse. Okay, got it. Like just literally, I think I'm gonna open up a savings account this week and like every month put like $100 into it. So when they're 16, I've got like
lunch money.
just all of just
It's
thousands
a
upon
grocery
thousands of
grocery
bottles.
fund.
Yeah, it's like the added bump during the time of
Yeah,
like
you're
the
like
growth spurts.
16 playing
You're like, oh
soccer.
my gosh,
Oh, eating
it's
all the food.
all like, Dad, I need a snack. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know what it's gonna be.
We can't afford it, son. You're gonna have to
Yeah,
go wash dishes somewhere.
exactly. Go most of me. I mean, that's what I'm looking for. I got a landscape crew soon.
You got a soccer team.
Man, they're gonna be my deal to do my yard in like 10 minutes. We're like, all right, who's mowing the front? Who's mowing the black?
Yeah,
You got a blower, you edge, done.
yeah. They're gonna come to
Like
my
if I have
house.
a weed in my yard, I'm gonna be pissed because someone should have been on it. There's no excuse with for you.
Yeah. I need 'em.
Especially if you want to eat today, you need to
That's right. That's right.
again teach them the things they need to know how to do. Best. I don't know. I used to be able to hear cars in the.
Yeah,
That
it's
was
a loud
weird.
one.
But
Yeah.
so yeah, the hospital experience was good. We got great care where we were. The nurses were wonderful. Everyone was healthy. The level, I think the level of just emotion, I think is starting to balance for everyone. And what I was telling you before we got on the podcast is now the shift, right, where it's like, how can I assist you, mom, with the baby as best I can, and then shifting to the other kids. Thankfully, with our business, I'm able to check some emails during the sporadic times that I have, try to keep a good pulse on it. But we've got obviously a great team to where I don't have as much anxiety, even being a co-owner of a business, that the wheels are gonna fall off the bus just because I'm not daily,
Right.
second by second in the office. So that obviously helps in that regards. But my job isn't one where if I'm not physically present in an office doing a task, then I'm not working. So that obviously gives me a lot of flexibility. But leading up to the birth, I was in with COVID and schools being canceled. I was doing a lot of I worked the morning shift, then the afternoon, parenting.
Mhm.
And I noticed that I was having a lot of, I mean, short tempered is, I guess, the easiest way, where it's like, why aren't you doing this? Why are you doing that? And it's like not taking into the full account that, well, they're bored as hell because they weren't interacting with other kids. I mean, they're at an age where they want to do that, right? We can't go anywhere, especially when it was like full on, kind of like for us, full on lockdown meant couldn't go to the beach, everything else was canceled, but, so because I was mentally still stuck at the office, so
It's
because I
hard.
wanted I
You
wanted
and I
to
are
I wanted to
wired for
be
working,
yeah,
and it's
I'm a
hard.
workaholic. I noticed this past week when it was like, you know what, I will check what needs to be checked off the list with my role in the business, but short of that, like I'm going to devote my attention to making sure the
Family's good.
needs of the family are met to the best of my ability. And it's been amazing how much more receptive my kids have been, especially the older ones have been to me when I have more patience about them getting into the car.
It's a mindset thing, right? And I've talked about that 1,000 times. Like, if you put yourself into a mental shift of like, okay, I'm just in parenting mode. Like, I'm not trying to rush them off to do this, to do that, so that I can get to the office to get this
Yeah.
done. Da da da. You're just like, well, all right, well, it's just parenting now. So
Well,
like,
a good
things slow
example would
down
be
a
like
little
this
bit.
morning trying to come in here. I took them some of this morning, and they were taking their sweet
Sweet
ass
time.
home, and so like I started getting like, hey, like you got to get in the car, we got to do that, and I was like, I had to like a whoa moment, where I was like, oh, like because I want to be somewhere at a specific time, even though there was no deadline, it was just I wanted to be there sooner. All of a sudden, I was just projecting that completely on my kids, which I guess I use the analogy when before we started the podcast of like cleaning up, right? My kids are 4, like they definitely need to know how to pick up their Legos. Like
Yeah.
they're capable of it. They need to do it. Now, should it take them an hour to do it? No. Should it take them 30 minutes? No. But should they do it in the 5 minutes that I can do it? Probably not. Like you can pick up on if your kid's just being a little lazy,
Right. Or
you
they get
know.
distracted, or do they want to
They
start
they they,
playing
they
with
start
them,
start playing them again,
and you're like, no,
or
no, no,
or
no, we're
just
cleaning up.
or just like they're taking their time, but they're getting the job done. And up until this point, I've always been like, all right, we got to get to bed, we got to go. Like, why you take, it's like, well, that's not very helpful in teaching them to be kind of like disciplined and cleaning up, like age appropriate, right? If
Hmm.
a 10-year-old can't pick up his Legos, take him outside and whoop his ass. Like, come on, like he hasn't been trained right. Like, you're just being a jerk at this point.
Right.
You're physically capable. You're most of the time mentally capable. Like, come on, what are you doing?
Yep.
Like, you're just being a jerk.
Yep.
4-year-old, it's like you can still be a
There's
jerk, but gotta have a little more patience going into it. And it's like, and so it's like, all right, if the 2-year-old's picking it up a little bit faster than you, then I know you're just kind of being slow. And it's like, hey, look, we gotta do this. But just getting in the car, like I said, I went for a hike yesterday, and it was just like it was hot and everything else, but like trying to balance, right? Like I had our cruiser, so it's like like it's hot and they've been running around. Like I'm happy to push you, but like, all right, I'm gonna push you to this section, then you need to walk the next section, and then put like just trying to find those balance. Whereas before, I'd be like, if you're not walking, I'm like, get out, and and then everyone gets all mad and
Yeah, you just
fussy, and
bring the stress levels up, and it's just not fun for anybody.
yeah. I mean, so just trying to balance that and coming up with the right perspective, I think is helped a lot.
Yeah,
So
it comes down to like a leadership thing. As I sit here and drink this Jocko Go, I was listening to Jocko on the Joe Rogan podcast. He was on it again last week, and they were talking about just what the current state of America and all the craziness going on and all stuff. And Jocko was talking about it being such leadership problems, where people um, on multiple levels. But one of the things he talked about was like, people just need to be told what to do, but two, not always, like in terms of like, say, Minneapolis, for example, somebody needs to come in there and not just dictate what's going to happen, but go to the front lines, to the people who are in that city, understanding what the problem is, and then figuring out a plan with those people, so that one, it's their plan. Maybe the leader takes and makes a few adjustments to that plan, but all in all, it's like their plan to fix their city, so they're fully vested in it, and then like kind of push them towards that. But the other side of the leadership thing I thought was really interesting is like, you take some of the top trained SEALs. He comes from the SEAL teams, that have trained for 18 months for a 6-month deployment for very specific missions, and they go in, they do what they got to do. They're blowing doors off of things and kicking doors in and taking out bad guys and doing whatever. But then at the end of that, like everyone's just kind of standing outside, like, what do we do next? And no one really knows what to do until the leader comes in. It's like, all right, everybody get on the roof. It's like, okay, now we know what to do. Everybody to the roof. And it's kind of like that same thing where like you just have to keep people moving in the right direction with some of that leadership and not, I think the most interesting thing to me was like that, let everybody come up with the plan together.
Yeah.
So everyone's like vested into that plan. And I tend to do that with my kids, not realizing it. I think it's like, hey, we're going to clean this room up. And, it's like, where do you want to start? Do you want to start over here? Do you want to start over there? Or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I was, one of the pediatricians was like, don't, I wrote it down just because I'm gonna completely butcher it. It was like, stop trying to figure out what your kid needs. Tell them what they need.
Oh yeah, that's
And so kind of using that approach where it's like they need to know how to clean up, and like what do they want? They want to play, and they don't want to clean up. And it's like, well, if you just kind of come in there and just start demanding, like just drop the hammer on them, like they're gonna come in a little resentful. But like you said, if you come out with a little bit more plan, it's like, okay, well, we are going to clean up the room because that's what needs to be done. Let's to the age appropriate.
right, right.
How do we want to tackle this project?
Right.
This
You want to pick up
project?
your dolls first or your dresses first? Like where, you know what I mean? And let them
Same with
start.
even food. It's like I hear a lot of parents that have just become short order cooks, and it's like, well, I mean, short of your kid having an allergy and can't eat something that you then cook for yourself, it's like if you know your kid is capable of eating a hot dog,
They're going
and
to eat the hot dog.
and the kid, you put it on their plate and they don't want to eat said hot dog, then it sounds like they are going to be hungry because you are providing them nourishment. I mean, maybe the hot dog isn't the best nourishment or not. We can get into
Whatever.
that.
Yeah.
It is food. Do you want to eat it or not? I don't want to eat it today. I'm sorry.
You know what's really
Again,
interesting?
I'm not going to say, well, do you want a hamburger? It's like, no, like I'm going to tell you that you need food, and here is the food that I know you're capable of eating without having problems. Here you go. And I feel like you got to just start down that path, or else your kid's just gonna,
Well, you have to. And some of the most interesting people, or some of the most not even interesting, but the people that we look up to in society all had like rough childhoods. You know what I mean? Like there's adversity there, or parents that were just super hard. Like my dad would have whipped my ass if I did that, or this or that. Like, and you don't like as an adult, you appreciate that like your parents were tough on you. They made you do certain things, and you got discipline out of it, or whatever. And I think it's super, and it's a very hard thing to do as a parent, is to like feel like you're making your kid upset because you're being hard on them, but it's like such a good life lesson that they won't appreciate until they're older. There was things that like I didn't do certain things, or I was afraid to do certain things, or I knew I wasn't going to because I knew that if I got in trouble for that or got caught, or my dad this, like that was the end of it. I was like, felt like might as well start digging myself a hole because I'm dead if I do that. So yeah, it was really interesting to.
I mean, because the last thing you want to do is like especially a lot of times how you can solve the problem, like, like I don't know, kids want a snack, right? And I'm like, hey, we're gonna have some, I don't know, goldfish, right? And it's like, no, like I want a granola bar, and I'm like, well, no, like you already had one.
I love goldfish, by the way.
They are delicious.
I survive on goldfish.
So like you could easily solve the problem, right? Solving the problem is, here's your granola bar. But you also need to know that like you don't always get everything you want in life at the time that you want it.
That's the biggest thing I tell my kids all
and
the
it's
time.
Again, it's like it's not that you're not stunting their like I was gonna say stunting your growth. I was like actually like providing growth for them, because they're like you're not trying to just be like the world just sucks and you don't get what you want. It's like, no, like it's not like the pessimistic point of view. It's more just simply that like there are just simply times in life and things in life that are going to happen that aren't going to go the way you want them. How do you deal with that? And if you don't have the emotional intelligence to deal with it, because in this case every time you said you wanted a granola bar, you got a granola bar, then you're never going to be able to overcome those other things. And now that I'm talking about granola bars, I'm kind of hungry.
Well, it is noon, and I'm pretty hungry, and it's Mo's Monday.
Oh, it's Mo's Monday.
Super excited about that.
Yeah, actually, I might need you to pick me up something.
Yeah.
Not that the people listening care, but got to add that extra guacamole, right?
That's
Pay
right.
that $1.
That's right.
But unless you're my kids, and then it's like $4 extra, and then we're gonna
It just got compounded. Like, do you want queso with that?
like no.
That's the funny thing at Mo's. It's like, it's not fries. Would you like fries with that? Like, do you want queso with that? That's
my kids love cheese.
Yeah, so do mine. Until
But,
they don't. And then all of a sudden, it's like a cheeseburger. Like, I
Well,
don't like the yellow cheese. Like,
and that's
just
the
shut
balance.
up and eat it.
Well, that's sort of the balance, right? Too, like your kids will have those fluctuations. Like they love pizza on, they crush pizza on Friday, right? And next Friday, you're like, oh, might as well just do pizza again.
It's
It was
easy,
like it was an easy thing. And they're like, I hate this, and you're like, and so you're like, they're allowed to have those emotional ups and downs as their brains and neurons connect. So it's like, it's just a weird balance, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like,
and you always say,
I know that
well, I'm not really a flexible parent, so you guys are tough. You're hard, like way harder, I think, than we are on our kids for sure. But I wish we were as not flexible as you guys at times, because there's certain things we've let slide for sure because it's the easier route, but it's like come back to bite us in the ass a few times. And you're like, fuck, it's because I let it go one time or whatever.
Well, I mean, it's like, oh, he's 4, he doesn't get it. And I'm like, I'll tell my kids something. So I was gonna go get donuts for Father's Day. Well,
I wanted donuts for Father's Day too, and I didn't.
So I was like, this is Saturday night. I'm like, hey kids, like, you know what? Tomorrow's Father's Day. We're gonna how about we're gonna go pick up some donuts before we go on our hike?
You go to Aldway,
and they'll be like, this is awesome. And then like Sunday morning, I wake up and I go, crap, it's Father's Day. Everyone's gonna go get donuts. I don't have I ain't got time to sit in line for an hour for some damn donuts. With the fact I'm gonna get no sleep tonight, I was like, I'm just gonna make some cinnamon rolls in the morning.
Yeah.
We're gonna pretend like we went, So I was like, man, they ran out of sprinkled donuts. I called them, they didn't have donuts. I kind of white lied right to their face, but yeah, but
the point being that
then the next, like this morning, my dad, and they're like, how come we didn't go get donuts? And you're like, oh, crap, like you didn't forget. And then like they're like, well, and then I told them something like a week ago. I'm kind of drawing a blank on it now, and it'd be like, man, like, I think so many people, myself included, underestimate the capabilities of children.
Well, there's certain things they latch on to. There's like this excitement around this one thing that they won't let go of. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but
so because it could be there's some things where, even this morning, and this one happened to me. Cameron, make sure you get your bag out of Mom's car for gymnastics in the morning, because I'm taking you. She's not. She has to go. Well, usually I take Cameron to gymnastics, but Brandy picks her up, and her car's always at home in the morning. But Brandy had a doctor's appointment this morning, so she left before us, and then I get in the car this morning with Cameron, and she's like, I don't know where my bag is. I'm like, well, did you get it out of Mom's car? No. I'm like, it's like you tell them to do things and they forget it and they let it slide and they're swinging or whatever. But if that was like, hey, we're gonna go get donuts after gymnastics tomorrow, like she wouldn't have forgot that. You know what I mean? So it's like it's an excitement. There's something around some sort of something that's exciting to them they won't forget. But if they don't care about it or it doesn't spark that excitement,
well, it's like where did you leave your hat? And it's like, because we're freaking out about where our hat is, and it's like, well, they kind of forgot that. Like, I mean, obviously, but man, I tell you what though, but
certain things,
but over,
like a
I think
steel trap.
Overwhelming, overarching. I don't know my word. I'm starting to lose steam here, people. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just I've had my brain on, and now it's like, whoo, too much thinking. What was I gonna say? I think we still, like, and myself included, really, I think our kids are a lot more capable than we probably give them a lot of credit for. And I think the older generations probably, they had to, like when it was like, well, we got to go plow the field and you're 5, like pick up a shovel, bro, if you want to eat,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of glad we progressed where they could have a little bit more of a childhood for sure, and have those developments. But I think the older generations definitely knew that kids were much more capable if educated and
Shown.
taught and
Yeah.
shown. Whereas now it's a little bit more like, "Well, I can't make them clean up their room. They're 4." It's like, no, like you just start small when they're 2, and eventually by the time they get to 4, they'll be able to do a lot more because it's life changing now for me when it's like, hey, go pick out some clothes. Now, part of me wants to pick out what they're gonna wear, but it's like, you know what? Like as long as they put on clothes, like I just
Whatever.
don't
Doesn't
care.
matter.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, like you're wearing all blue, whatever. Like doesn't matter. But they're able to do it, and you're kind of like, oh, like they are capable if you've kind of chipped
Yeah.
away at it. So I think that's gonna go a long way with trying to help with
For sure.
baby number 4 too. So um, yeah,
Yeah, it'll
that's
be
about
interesting to see kind of how it progresses now that you've had so many and you're like such a seasoned vet. You're like, oh, I know what I'm doing here. But then again, every
but
kid's different.
every kid.
So
I was gonna say like it's like the one benefit I think we have bringing an infant home, a newborn home over like a first time parent listening is a lot of those noises and a lot of those you feel like you're gonna break them. I know they're not gonna break. So
mhm.
I mean I forgot, but as soon as I went to change the first diaper, I was like, oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
like
Tar.
that. But the legs are so bowed and their feet are curled up, and you're like, how do I stretch this leg out to be able to get it in their little like little sleeper? You're like, oh,
They
you
do.
just
They're
you
just
just
like,
do it, but you're like, well, it's in a womb. Like, how do you think they fit in there? They're all curled up, and everything's hopefully starts to straighten out. Like it's done. But those little things, if first time parents, you're like, I'm gonna break, I break them, and then they start crying, and you get anxious because you're like, well, am I doing it fast enough and doing like. Whereas now it's like you're crying. I'm like, yeah, it'll be over with in about 4 seconds, and you're just, so I think thankfully have that going for me that you're used to those noises, which I will say, thankfully, because we've had boys, like I've just got a plethora of hand me downs that
yeah.
we just have. And the magnet baby
Uh,
get ups, they're expensive. It's easier when I've been able to amortize them over 4 children. But I tell you what, in like the middle of the night and
that's
something
Alex,
else
the
like that,
finance guy.
dude. When you're like you get the one thing in and you flop it down, it's like, and it like goes on down. You're like, instead of doing those snaps,
Snaps.
I hate the
And
damn
then you
snaps.
get one of like you
It was
start so
one
it's
off,
off
and
and
you're
you're
like,
like gotta
because with the magnet one, you can grab the one end, grab the bottom, and pull it straight.
and it
Done.
just snaps them
I
all
was
together.
like, hey, so for a baby registry, besides on obviously a tactical baby gear diaper bag or baby carrier or some plug that I can push right now, if you need to splurge, by all means. Like I know they go through them so quickly, but
Magnet onesies.
if you can convince grandma to buy some magnet onesies, yeah, well, they're like I guess they're not like a onesie, they're like the full on like legs and arms. But point being, it's amazing how those little bit of things just it's one less
It's a
thing to
nice
fight with. You
workflow.
know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah.
they're
You
already
got this
crying and whining
squirmy
and
baby and you're
everything.
trying
Yeah,
to
just
snap
like
stuff. And then
I
it's
tell you
off
what,
one, and then you're undoing it and
yeah,
trying to redo it, or you're like, whatever, I don't care, it's just off a button. But then you
exactly.
like start twitching because you're OCD, and then
Yeah. So, but so some of those newborn things, have kind of come back to me real quickly, but I think those have helped just keep the overall stress level down. Whereas, like when we brought the twins home, it was one like there's 2 of them, and then I like for me, I'm like, man, I don't know how these people with triplets do this because this shit is crazy, but but I think all the other kids can sense it, and even the baby, I think, can sense it that mom and dad are not like, oh, that's a normal cry, or they make that random twitch, and oh, this is how you swaddle. You know what I mean?
hmm
You got to get that good swaddle in. They've
that's
got
it.
they've got so many new like magic blanket, this, that, and the other to do now, and they're pretty simple, thankfully.
We need to
But like
test them.
they just to keep them a little bit more, because like that's the like new babies do all these like twitching. So if they're twitching and their hands are out, they'll wake themselves up.
Yep.
So it's like you feel like I'm like, what like vice grip sort of contraption am I putting
Put a
you in?
ratchet
It's like
strap around
looks
them.
like a little like it looks like a mummy suit, but it does the trick.
Yeah.
But
One of my kids, I don't remember who it was, but like I was a swaddle champion. But then I think it was Kendall. She was like Houdini. She would just
get that
get
one
out
little
every
hand.
single time. And I'm like, what? How did you do that? I just wrapped you up so tight. Anyways.
Yeah, so yeah, there's just so many. I'll tell you what, if you're about to be a first time parent, like definitely do some practice swaddles. It's so much. I mean, it sounds so weird,
By
but
swaddling, if you're not even familiar with swaddling, if you don't even know what we're talking about, it's like wrapping your kid up like a burrito
but like you, I mean, you
to
gotta,
sleep.
but you can't be afraid. Like you gotta hold that arm down.
Oh,
You
yeah,
gotta
you
pull
gotta,
it
like-
down, then you tuck it on. You really gotta take charge.
We
You
need to
really
make
do
a
have to
video.
take
We
charge.
need to make a how to swaddle video.
But so there's just certain things that's like, it I think it pays dividends if you're you don't want to. I feel like there's always a balance, right? You can the dad, the mom, you can almost go on Dr. Google a little too much, and
Oh,
you're like,
geez.
oh my gosh, there's this thing, and he's got lupus. You're like, well, how'd you? Are you a medical doctor? Did you get it tested? Like maybe, but like let's
Calmate.
like
yeah, you can go down
more
that.
often than not, it's a newborn and he's got gas, or like let's burp him,
Yeah.
don't be impatient, if you just fed him formula or nurse, like take the 5 minutes if you can, like and, do it proper, like try to burp them and everything else to get them calmed down. But what I was gonna say is like you can go to Dr. Google and get way too much information that's a lot of it's crap and opinion, and take some with a grain of salt. But then the other side of it is like you can do too little to where you're kind of like getting anxious, and because you're like, I mean, you don't know what you're doing, and like so take the time to take a quite honestly take a class. Don't go too far down the rabbit hole of the Googles.
Yeah,
But
all of a sudden.
but the same token, like knowledge is powerful, and
Mhm.
so is experience. So. Because again, I mean, there's nothing like trying to put that diaper on where you're trying to. I mean, they're wiggling around, or you're picking up their legs, and you're like, am I gonna break them? Like you gotta manhandle, do it. And if
Cool.
you got boys, and you do like there's things with that, and if there's girls, make sure you're wiping the right direction, and there's some things you need to know. There's things you need to know.
On that note, next week I want to hear more about how the kids are kind of taking on new brother and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But we'll wrap it up here. It's almost 12:30. I'm starving, and we're just gonna be a huge line out the door at Moe's if I don't get there soon. So
They're saving your place in line. Don't
yeah,
worry.
I'm sure. Guys, thanks for listening. It's nice to be back. I think you can expect more consistent episodes now that things are kind of back in the loop here. Alex will make his way back in. We'll have some other guests. I've got some people I'm in the talks with right now and scheduling some podcasts to have them on as guests. So we're looking forward to that. So make sure you subscribe if you aren't already. Leave a comment and ratings and reviews on all the things on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. And we appreciate it. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.